Hello again, everyone. This is Chris here, and it's Robert Harding, and this is the Citizen Sports Weekly for August 14th, 2014.
Boom.
There we go.
Well played.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Anyway. The date is such an accomplishment. It's such a feat with Chris.
You know, in my life, you take the victories where you can get them, okay? So we're going to talk about two sports topics this week. One of them is going to be the Tony Stewart situation or accident or tragedy, whatever you want to call it, happened in Canandaigua on Saturday night, which is nearby us. But we're going to first talk about international basketball. This whole Paul George thing that happened a couple weeks ago where he had a very ghastly leg injury. It was horrible. I showed the video to my wife, and she literally just like recoiled and like gasped and covered her mouth. So if you go by that test, it was pretty bad. Okay. Anyway, so the debate now is should NBA superstars want to play for our national team? And you know, I think this comes up from time to time because you know, obviously other pro sports like hockey with the Olympics with the NHL players and baseball, the World Baseball Classic. Should major league or major professional stars play in these international competitions where really, I have as much national pride as anybody, but really they're exhibitions when you really come down to it, okay? Should they be playing in them? And I say yes, okay? And I'll give you a great example why. Back in the early 80s when John McEnroe was probably one of the top two, if not the best men's tennis player in the world, he always played in the Davis Cup because he said it's for my country. And I feel that I owe my country something, and the least I can do is to represent my country in international competition. And I still feel that holds true. And yes, injuries do happen, but catastrophic injuries like Paul George's, those are pretty rare. And I think that a player should represent his country if asked. And it's an honor to represent your country. I would get goosebumps if I ever put on a uniform. It said USA on it, and I was going to play for my country. It would mean a lot to me to do something like that. So, the injuries are rare, but I still think that if you're called upon, you step up. It's the least you can do, and you represent your country. What do you think, Robert?
I agree with that sentiment. I think it's going to be. At least in terms of the NBA, they're still having this conversation with hockey. Mm-hmm. It seems to be kind of every time the Winter Olympics comes around, there's a debate over whether the NHL allow the players to participate, and that's ongoing. That's every 4 years it seems. With basketball though, I think the Paul George injury. And then Kevin Durant pulled out. I think he cited some other reason, but you can't help but wonder if it was the main reason he decided to withdraw from the team is because of that George injury, and that he didn't want to put himself at risk for an injury of his own, which could jeopardize his own NBA season. So I think it'll be interesting to watch how this unfolds, not only, in the next month, but next year or so as we get closer to 2016 and, how this plays out, who's going to participate and who's not. Because you do have that, right. I think the benefits outweigh the costs. And like you said, the injuries, especially one like Paul George, extremely rare. But, I think that'll weigh on players' minds when they make these decisions. Should I participate in the Olympics? Should I participate in the World Championships? I think that Paul George injury will kind of, weigh on them and sit in the back of their minds as to whether or not they should do it. Right or wrong. I'm with you. I think they should participate. But, I do think that George injury, because he's one of the top stars in the NBA now, certainly the best player on Indiana, and he's gone toe-to-toe with LeBron a few times. I mean, this guy he's no slouch. So,
no, absolutely.
So it's going to get a lot of attention, and I think it's going to lead a lot of players to think, should I be doing this? Should I be participating? Most of them, I think, will, let it slide, chalk it up to, an innocent injury, unfortunate as it may seem. But, at the end of the day, I think, every player will sit back and say, is it worth it? Most of them, I think, will say yes. But there certainly will be some that sit there and say, you know what, I'll wait until the NBA season.
Well, I think there should be a couple exceptions for a player to be able to decline. Number one, if there is a history of injuries. I mean, if you're a player and you're injured a lot, and you don't need to be taking the risk. But if you're healthy and you're in good shape and everything, and you don't have that history of injuries, then you should be playing. Okay. Number two, I think if you represent your country more than a couple times, then I think you should be exempt. I mean, if you've put on the USA uniform maybe for 2 different Olympics or a couple international competitions or whatever, I think that's fine. You've done your service. Let somebody else have a turn because only a certain number of players make these teams, okay? And I keep thinking back, if this attitude was prevalent back in 1992, we would have had the dream team.
Right.
Okay? You think about that team. Jordan, Barkley, Magic, Bird. I mean, all those, Malone, just Christian Laettner. Okay, no, okay. I had to throw him in. But seriously, all those great players coming together, and yeah, they dominated, and there wasn't much suspense to the games and everything. But still, it was a special thing to see those guys play together for one time. And if they were like, oh no, I might get hurt, no, then we never would have had that. So, anything else you want to add, Robert?
No, I think that covers it.
All right. Our next topic is the hot sports topic of the week, and that's Tony Stewart and that very sad situation in Canandaigua, New York, which is about an hour away from us to the west, that happened on Saturday night where, unfortunately, a young driver was killed. It's just really sad. And I mean, the investigation isn't done yet. I don't want to put blame on anybody or anything here, okay? I really think that you do a disservice to Tony Stewart and Ward when you say it's his fault. I think like anything else in life, it's never just one person's fault. There's always a combination of factors that lead into these things. And I'm not going to blame anybody. It's a sad situation. A family's lost their child. A young person has lost his life. And Tony Stewart, I mean, has got to live with this, okay? He, like I said, no matter what happened, it's his vehicle that hit this guy and killed him. And he's got to live with that for the rest of his life. And I never would want to imagine what that type of feeling must be to weigh upon your shoulders that you were responsible, indirectly or directly, whatever, for someone's life being ended. So it's just a sad situation all around. I think if anything, hopefully something good will come out of this where there'll be rules about whether you don't leave your car after an accident or something, or maybe people are a little more careful during caution flags, which they should be anyways. But just hoping that maybe some good comes out of this, and if ultimately that does happen, then Ward did not die in vain.
Yeah, just a few points. I think it's less about blame and more about responsibility.
Right.
And what it boils down to is, first off, Kevin Ward should never have gotten out of his car. And that has to stop. Not only, based on this example,
right,
but we've had past examples, where guys get out of their car and throw their helmet at another car just because they're angry. That stuff has to stop. And hopefully, we've seen some tracks in the past few days, either reinstate some rules that they had, or remind drivers of rules, or implement new rules,
right,
to make it clear that you are not to leave your car
unless your car is on fire.
Right,
obviously,
right.
That's it.
There's certain safety things where
right,
there's an exception, but if you get hit in your car and the only reason you're getting out of your car is because you're angry at the other driver and you want to give them peace of mind, no, that's got to stop. And it's not just on the dirt tracks; it's on the top level of
It's
racing.
every level of auto racing.
But there's that part of it. Two, with Stewart, I think at the end of the day, I wouldn't be surprised if there's some criminal charges here. I don't think that there'll be murder or anything like that,
right,
but he will be, at least in my eyes, at some point he will be held responsible criminally for this, just because of the fact that if he was, as some Dave Axton, as we
right,
talked about, he was on the track that night and he thinks that Stewart was just trying to buzz him and it went too far. Well, if that's the case, he's still responsible.
I'm kind of curious, if you file a charge, if you find evidence that there was criminal wrongdoing, what charge do you file? I mean, we're talking vehicular manslaughter. I mean, that's usually not. Those are for people just driving on the highway, not like at a racetrack. Vehicular manslaughter. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a lawyer. And Robert thought I was going to say something next, but I'm not. I'm not a lawyer, but what charge do you file here? And I'll be honest with you. I think what's going to happen is, I think eventually you will see a civil lawsuit.
Oh, I think without question.
I
it's
think
gonna
you will
happen.
see a civil lawsuit,
Absolutely.
and I think you will see a very hefty settlement. Because I don't think Tony Stewart wants this to go to trial. I mean, if I'm Tony Stewart, I mean, like I said, you feel horrible about what happened, but you don't want this thing to keep going and going. You're going to lose sponsors, and I know that sounds very callous, but racing is a business. Okay, this is his job, and he has to think about his job. And if I'm him, I would say after the dust settles, after everything settles down, I think there's going to be some type of a civil suit, and I think there'll be a settlement. Okay, I really believe that, and I think that's the right thing to do. I think Ward's family, there should be some type of a civil settlement here, and I think that's what'll happen eventually. The criminal, I mean, it's going to be so tough to prove that unless he actually volunteers and says, yeah, you know something, I was upset, I saw him out in the track, I was just going to get near him to scare him a little bit, and then something happened, and I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll see. So
Yeah. I think this will, for all these different reasons, Kevin Ward represents, the young dirt track racers that are out there. Jonathan Monfiletto, who's
Right.
filled in. He had his bachelor party up at Fulton Speedway, and we went down on the track, and one of the things you observe is that there's a lot of veterans,
Right.
certainly on the dirt tracks, but there's a lot of young kids too. And the race that we watched on the track, I think the kid that won, he was like 20 or 21 or something. And it just kind of reminds you, there's kids involved in this, young adults. And I think it's going to have far-reaching effects. This whole incident, this accident. Not only for Stewart, but right down to the lower levels. These guys are, you're going to have to, kind of change your ways. The dirt tracks, kind of, are where it all starts for a lot of people, and hopefully they can, establish some better practices there, so that when these guys do go up the ranks, we're not seeing what we see now, where these behaviors continue and so on. Hopefully it leads some changes in the racing world, and we get a much better product for it. And it's sad that it has to happen because someone died, but hopefully we make sure that Kevin Ward's memory lives on, and that racing does better for itself and for him in his honor.
if all of this results in changes that saves at least one life, then his death will not be in vain, and that would be good. So. All right, Robert, I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Sure
It's another
thing.
Citizen Sports Weekly for this week. We appreciate you watching. Please, share our links and watch our videos. We appreciate your support. Until next week, we'll see you then.